You're trying to burn body fat and build muscle, and you're looking at scientific studies. What's the best way to do so? Stop right now. Don't look at those studies. Consider this first. All right, I'll start with the first thing you're going to look at, which is how big was the sample size in the study? This is important to look at. And by the way, studies can be very valuable, but sometimes they're not valuable at all, and they can point you in the wrong direction. And this is when you need to be very, very careful. And one of the things to look at, I just said it, which is how big was the sample size? Was it 10 people? You know, if it's 10 people, then I would be very cautious at interpreting the result as something you can count on. Or was it done with 1,000 people? You know, that's something to pay attention to.
What do you think in terms of the average person, percentage-wise, just reads the title?
Everybody.
Yeah, versus like actually like going through these
abstract.
Yeah.
Abstracts. Okay, so you know what? Because this is my expertise is health and fitness. You see a lot of, especially like weight loss study headlines. You see a lot of them, right? Like compound in chocolate has been shown to blah. You know, compound in red wine, or this fruit has a fat burning. You know, whatever studies show. And I know as a coach and trainer, has worked with lots of people, and I was also taught a long time ago how to read studies. That people aren't going to read this study. They're going to pay attention. They're just going to look at this, and then they're going to move away from what really is going to make a difference and towards something that makes no difference whatsoever. You know, years ago, I had a client who was a professor of psychology, and she sat me down because I would talk about studies, and she goes, "Do you know how to look at studies?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she broke this down. And that was one of the things she said. She's like, "We got to look at the sample size. Say, you know, if there's a lot of people in there, that's more likely to be accurate, because very few people, if we pick 10 people to study, I could very well pick, you know, out of those 10 people, 7 of them who are going to respond really well to what I'm studying, or people who may be biased. And so now my study is going to show that something works really great when in fact it may not. For example, if I pick, you know, 10 people and I'm testing the results of a vitamin, maybe 6 of them actually lack this vitamin. Well, now this vitamin looks like a miracle drug.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
It's amazing.
Absolutely. So it's really important to pay attention.
I'm looking ahead at all your other points, and I don't see this, and I feel like it would belong here then. With that is also the length of a study.
Yes, yes.
And even if it's a good length, it's also something to just be considered, like no matter what. So even like a good 90-day or 6-month-long study, okay, that's great. But in the context of what we're talking about, and we understand how the body adapts, like that still needs to be considered as part of the point.
I'll create a fake example that I think will illustrate this. Right? If we studied cocaine for depression over 30 days, it would look like a great antidepressant. Over 30 days, we tested cocaine's effect on depression. And it was like, this is the most amazing.
Client woke up 2 hours earlier. Client was more productive at work. You know what I'm saying?
Everybody's super happy.
Yeah, positive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but follow that out for 3 years.
Picked up dancing on the side. You know, like
follow it for
all these markers.
Follow it for 3 years, and all of a sudden you see cocaine was terrible on their psyche and their health. But that just gives you your great point, Adam, is the length of the study. Exercise studies that's one of the things I really look at with exercise studies. Because when it comes to exercise, strength training, and other forms of exercise, cardiovascular training, even flexibility, mobility training, especially with strength training, just changing just the novelty effect, almost always, unless it's like crazy or terrible, almost always has a positive effect. So you could take almost anybody who's strength training, change a variable, like make the reps go high, make the reps go low.
Yeah, how's that saying go? Almost everything works until it doesn't?
Yeah, well, almost everything works, but nothing works forever.
Yeah.
So when I look at like a strength training study, I always take it with a grain of salt because of the time frame. And I'd like to see a study that's done for like a year or 2 years to make a determination. For example, a very commonly cited statistic in strength training, and this is backed by many studies, although now we have so many studies that actually prove what I'm about to say. But 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago, if somebody said, what's the best rep range to build muscle? Well, the studies were all showing 8 to 12. 8 to 12 was the hypertrophy range, right? Low reps weren't as effective. High reps were definitely not as effective, but the studies were like 12 or 16 weeks long. If you stretch that out long enough, you'll see that the 8 to 12 reps really stops working, and they have to switch out and move into a lower rep phase or a higher rep phase. It also didn't illustrate the fact that all the rep ranges built muscle. So it's not like 8 to 12 built muscle, all the others did nothing. They all built muscle. So then the thing to consider is, okay, when do I use each of those rep ranges? And as a trainer, when I train people, I noticed if I kept them in a rep range for too long, it would stop working. Didn't matter how great my programming was. One of the best things I could do would just change the rep range. I didn't have to change the exercises or anything else. Just change the, lower the weight and make the reps go higher or vice versa. And then it was like magic. People would start getting results again.
Yeah, and I think the point of this conversation, because I know right away it always tends to ruffle the feathers of the kids that love to
science people.
yeah, to lead with all the studies. It's not that to completely disregard studies. It's just that there's another point, like with experience, that I think matters, and I think that you have to take that into consideration and just the nuance when it comes to individuals. I mean, you could have two people that are the same weight, same goal, same age, yet the approach and results will be vastly different based off of many factors. Their sleep, their hormones, their prior dieting,
their attitude,
diet habits, their attitude, there's so much when it comes to getting results and building muscle, losing body fat, and such a wide individual variance that what worked for this person fantastic, or what worked in this study so well may not for somebody else, and you just have to consider all that.
Absolutely. Another one would be like, what are the controls? So control, like, are they able to weed out variables that could be potentially influencing the result of the study? For example,
to do the cigarette and coffee one.
I love that one. That's one of my favorites. For a long time, studies showed that drinking coffee was correlated to cancer risk. Mm-hmm. So they actually used to say coffee probably or may cause cancer. But what they didn't do very well was control for the fact that back in the day, people who drank the most coffee smoked. This was a thing. 30, 40 years ago and before. Like everybody who
there was no Starbucks.
Everybody who drank the most coffee was doing it with a cigarette.
Whenever you talk about that, I have such a vivid. I live with when I first moved to the Bay Area. I moved here when I was 19, turning 20, and I lived with my grandmother. And my grandmother started every morning. She would move her little chair, and she'd sit over there with her arthritis, and she would have a cup of coffee and smoke her cigarette. I'd be getting up for work, getting ready to head off.
There she is.
Head off to the gym. There's my grandma at 7 o'clock in the morning, having her cigarette and drinking her coffee at the same time.
Well, there's a synergistic effect between nicotine and caffeine. Everybody knows this. People now are using the nicotine lozenges with caffeine,
and Zyn and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like a synergistic, people like the way it feels. But that's what happened. So people thought, until they controlled the cigarette smoking. When they controlled the cigarette smoking, here's what they found. Not only did coffee not cause cancer, it actually prevented cancer. It was actually the opposite of what we thought. Yeah. Another, common one in, especially in fat loss and muscle building or health studies, is the healthy user bias. Okay, that you have to control for. So people who eat a lot of, I'll make one up, right? People who eat a lot of oranges tend to be healthier. You might think to yourself, oranges are really healthy, but what we don't know do healthy people who follow healthy lifestyles, who exercise, get more sleep, do other things, do they also eat more oranges? So really, are we looking at a bias of healthy people isolating one thing? Here's another one that I love, okay? People who eat a lot of red meat have worse health. This is often one that's cited and quoted.
They tried to pair that forever.
And the problem with that is for decades.
Tease out the fast food people.
Not only that, but for decades, we've been hammered. It's been hammered into us that eating red meat is bad for us, okay? It was government policy, right? Since the 70s on, even today, they still try to hammer this. And so what ends up happening is you develop a poor health user bias. People who, the average person who generally, and it's changing these days because people are now starting to figure this out. But over the last 60 years, especially if you go 20 years and then before, people who ate the most red meat were people who were typically unhealthy because they ignored the health advice. Mm-hmm. So they didn't cut their red meat consumption. They also smoked cigarettes. They also didn't exercise. And so you're like, oh yeah, people who eat the most red meat have the worst health because we had a poor health user bias. We now know with controls, which is what I'm talking about, where they actually go in and control all these other factors, not only is red meat not bad for you, It's also positively correlated with health, with good health, good cognition, et cetera. And I'm talking about whole natural red meat, not processed meat, which they often don't also control for.
Well, that's probably what I think the biggest is like when you don't control for, because there's a lot of McDonald's and Burger King and Carl's Jr. people, Carl's
and
Jr.
hot
people,
dogs and salami,
that eat that way. And if you include all those, there's nobody, I don't think there's anybody who's trying to say any of that is healthy whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so if you just simply took that group out,
that's right,
and then just compared everybody who ate, it'd be massive difference.
Look at healthy people who eat a lot of red meat, and then healthy people who don't eat a lot of red meat, and then what you find is red meat is correlated or connected with better health in many cases.
Yep.
The next one is like, who was studied? I remember when my client brought this up to me, because we were talking about, it was a great discussion. It was one of my favorite, it's one of the things I love about training people is there are moments I distinctly remember with clients, because they were all really smart people, where they just taught me a lot. And she sat me down and she said, where do you think they do most of the studies, Sal? And I didn't know. I'm like, I don't know. They do them in labs. And she started laughing. She's like, colleges.
Yeah, young college men.
And what they do is they recruit, they put out a study and they say, we're looking for 50 people to be a part of a study, and we're going to pay you $40 a day.
Yeah.
And she's like, who do you think signs up for that? And I'm like, she's like, young college men who don't have a lot of money.
Easy gig that you could just go get, a couple bucks.
Don't mind being a guinea pig.
Don't worry about the risk.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of 20-year-old dudes who are like, don't have no money. They're like, I'll take a pill, or I'll go, do the study where I don't sleep for 3 days or whatever. And so what you have is a bias of young college-aged males, typically in many of these studies. So what if you're an older man? What if you're a woman? What if you're pregnant? What if you're, menopausal? You have to look at who was studied and does it actually apply? This one is another great one with exercise. You take a bunch of college-aged males and you're looking at HIIT cardio, and it looks like a panacea. But when I trained lots of middle-aged, everyday people, HIIT cardio was hit or miss. Like sometimes it was great, sometimes it was terrible.
Yeah.
It was just too intense and too stressful. But you give me a bunch of 20-year-olds, and HIIT cardio is probably going to outperform any other form of cardio. So you have to look at who was in the study as well. And then here's another one. Does it follow a consensus? Okay. I like meta-analysis, because meta-analysis is where it's a study of studies.
Yeah.
So they're like, what effect does carbohydrate...
Put them all together, right?
Yes,
yeah, I love that.
What effect does carbohydrate intake have on fat gain or fat loss? How effective are low-carb diets for this? How good is fasting for that? How good is whatever? And then what they'll do is they'll take 10 studies that are peer-reviewed, meaning they're all accepted as studies, and then they'll give you the consensus of all of the studies. Meta-analysis are, for me, that's one of the best places to look in terms of...
Any idea how often those end up disproving a lot of studies? Like once they start to draw correlations from other data points, does that many time end up like throwing a lot of studies out?
Dwarfing some of them, yeah.
Like, do you know how often? Like,
I don't know how often, but I do. Like, I'll give you a diet example. When low carb, keto dieting or Atkins kind of became popular in the 90s, the initial studies showed it was like great for weight loss. It was great for weight loss. But then we had more and more studies, and we found that it didn't assist in fat loss. But what happened is people lost more water weight faster, which is what happens, right? So if you're measuring just weight and you go no carb and someone else goes in a calorie deficit, both same, everything's the same. The difference is one's low carb, one is whatever, higher carb, but the calories are the same. And let's say the protein is good. What you end up seeing is initial weight loss being on the scale, showing up faster and greater in the low carb diet. Or that's because of because of water weight. When you go low carb, your body flushes out a bunch of water. It's a very easy way to lose 10 pounds on the scale. I mean, if I went no carb today, I would lose 10 pounds by the end of next week, but probably 1 pound of fat if it was in a deficit. Yeah. If not, I'd lose no fat. I'd just lose a bunch of water weight. Yeah,
and for the person who's freaking out, saying no way, it's you. So 3 to 10 pounds is what I used to say. Like,
I have a lot of muscle mass,
exactly.
So I have more water.
You're a big guy, and you would lose 10 easily. You would fluctuate that. But I mean, most of my female clients, it was a good solid 3-4 pounds.
Yep.
That they would lose just by pulling all the water out.
That's right. Hey, sorry to interrupt. Look, I have a free guide that teaches you how to lose fat in 3 steps, just 3 steps that will burn the most amount of body fat and help keep it off. This guide is totally free. We're giving it to everybody right now. If you want it, Click on the link at the top of the description below. All right, back to the show. Next up is, does it apply to you in any way whatsoever?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Will you even do it?
That's it. Like if I look at this study and it passed the test, like big sample size, done for a long time, great controls, it's a meta-analysis, and it's telling me that I'm going to burn 15% more body fat if I exercise at 3 a.m. outdoors.
Yeah.
Like I'm using
consistently do that.
Yeah, I'm using an extreme example, but no, it doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to wake up at 2:30 in the morning.
Okay, a good example of this is the way we talk about taking your creatine. The research shows that the most optimal time to take your creatine within 30 minutes to an hour of your workout.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody who is not going to be carrying all your supplements everywhere you go, and it's very easy, you can take first thing in the morning with your vitamins and breakfast, or at night before you go to bed, you're more likely to follow that. Then it doesn't matter.
More effective. Yeah.
So even though the studies will show this is the more optimal time, if you're more likely to be inconsistent because that's inconvenient at that time,
it's not effective anymore.
Exactly. Then the other times are superior because you'll be more consistent.
Let me piggyback off that, right? Creatine monohydrate, I'll use creatine, like you said, 5 grams a day, let's just say, great, studies show that's great, it's awesome. And then company comes out, like some of our partners, with gummy creatine. And it's like, wow, gummy, but that's going to add 7 grams of sugar. Except I don't like powder. I don't use the powder. A lot of people don't take the powder. Right. They stop taking it. So the gummies are going to make me take it more. So I add 7 grams of sugar. Who cares? Because now I'm going to be much more consistent. So does it apply to you in any way at all? I'll give you another example. When somebody asks me, what's the best form of X for, cardio, for example, I'm always going to reply by, which one do you like the most? Because if you hate it, it doesn't matter. You're not going to do it. So you have to always ask, does this apply, even if it's true, does this apply to me in any way whatsoever? And then finally, my favorite one, what do experienced coaches say? And this is because experienced coaches, and experience meaning coaches who've trained or worked with people for 10 plus years. And for me personally, if you're to ask me, when would you consider a coach to be really experienced? I would say about 10 years. And I'm using my own, I've trained lots of trainers. I know you guys have too. And we were trainers. I was good 5 years in. I wasn't experienced about 10. It took about 10 years for me to really be good. What do experienced coaches say? And experienced coaches will often say the opposite or maybe something different than a study. For example, fasted cardio in the morning burns more body fat. A lot of coaches will say this, man, when I have my clients do cardio first thing in the morning fasted, they just get leaner. And then there's all these studies, there's meta-analysis, and the studies are clear. Fasted cardio burns no additional body fat than cardio at other times of the day. But why the hell then are coaches, what do they keep saying fasted cardio burns more body fat?
There's
I'll tell you why.
Other behaviors that are attached to that.
It adds more activity to their day because they wake up and move.
That's right.
That's probably what's happening, right? Or water. Additional water intake doesn't cause more fat loss, right? We got all these studies that show as long as they're drinking what they're supposed to, doesn't make that big of a difference. Well, why do coaches say, man, when I get my clients to drink a gallon of water a day, they all seem to get a little leaner? Well, I'll tell you why, because they're not drinking other stuff.
Because all the behaviors are attached to it.
That's right.
You have that. I think why the coaches one is so important is because a coach who's experienced with a bunch of clients on that, they're not just taking the studies in consideration, they're also taking human behavior into consideration. Yeah. And to me, this is where it's really good, right? When you have good research and studies to point you in the right direction, paired with 10 years or more of experience, you can then take what we know from the studies, you can take what you know from human behavior, and together you have probably the more ideal answer for the average client. But many times that doesn't perfectly align with what the studies say. That's right. Sometimes it can even be counter what the study says because human behavior is so strong and that's more likely for them to adhere to. That's what you're going to lose.
I remember Mike Boyle kind of breaking this down because he's been using the rice method and using ice after like heavy training sessions with his athletes. And he's more concerned with longevity and making sure like the recovery is there, not necessarily because there was like this study that talked about the decrease in muscle building signal. Everybody stopped doing that with their athletes. And then it's just like one of those things where he's like, well, I've been doing this, for decades, and this is how I've applied. And he's got the best track record for keeping athletes healthy. healthy. And it's like,
we actually argued that. We said that when you're pushing the limit and you're redlining often, which athletes are, it allows you to work out more.
yeah.
So now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense.
So it didn't even apply to him. Yeah.
No.
It's funny. I want something that, and this is the conspiracy guy side over here in the corner too. It's like, I'm always looking at who's funding the study.
Yeah, I didn't even say that.
Yeah,
I didn't
know.
even say that, but you're right because
Especially in nutritional studies.
Yes.
Well, here's what happens.
It's so biased.
Here's what happens. They can do things with studies to keep them within the parameters of what's considered legitimate. Like they can shorten a study or lengthen a study. For example, and this has been shown, this has happened. A pharmaceutical company will do a 9-month study, but at 6 months, everything looked good and side effects started to really pop up around month 7. They'll stop the study and they'll publish the 6-month study and not show 9 months. And that's happened.
Cherry pick.
That's happened before. Pharmaceutical companies got sued over stuff like that. Or I'll give you a great example. In the 1970s, there was a study that was funded by the U.S. government to connect cannabis to cancer risk. They said, well, it definitely causes cancer because cigarettes cause cancer. Let's do the study. And when the study started showing that it wasn't causing cancer, in fact, it might actually have a slight protective effect, they stopped the study and didn't publish it. So sometimes they'll do that as well. They'll fund a study. Oh, we don't like those results. No one ever knows about it because so that's another one. That's another thing to kind of consider. But the reason why I'm careful with going down that path is because I also don't think you should be like, I don't trust any study.
Well, no, you also have to, I've heard Lane defend this.
Yes.
And he's like, the only way you're going to get money sometimes is from the people that are most interested in getting that study. So it's like, you know, expecting somebody to fund a study that has no benefit for them whatsoever is almost impossible. So that's studies wouldn't get done if they didn't have biased contributors to getting it done. And so that's
where the meta-analysis, I think, is great for that, though. You know, because then you can kind of pit like who's biased versus the other bias and see where we're at.
That's right. And this is one thing that we aim to do is we try to get in there and kind of figure it out. Like a great one, we just did an episode recently on hip thrusts versus squats. And the studies show that they both build the glutes the same. But so much anecdote from people online saying that hip thrusts build their butts more. Well, it's because the self-selection bias that we're dealing with are people who have trouble building their butts doing squats.
Right.
And in that case, a hip thrust, which allows you to feel your glutes more, it's easier to feel your glutes on a hip thrust than it is a squat. For those people, it is more effective. But they're not going to show that in those studies.
So true.
Yeah. So speaking of studies and human behaviors, like you brought up, Adam, interesting side effect from LMNT, our partners with the electrolyte powder. Do you know what I'm finding? So first off, we did a poll for all of our listeners, and it got first place. It was the most frequently used.
Yeah, by a lot.
By far.
Wow. I was surprised
of
at that.
all the partners we work with, it was the #1 most used product among all our partners.
By quite a bit. Yeah.
But here's what I found. There's an interesting side effect or behavior change I'm noticing with people who consume a lot of LMNT, because my whole family does it. My wife drinks it, whatever. It makes people drink more water. And it's because it's palatable.
Yeah.
It tastes good. Because it tastes good. Now, it doesn't have sugar. It doesn't have artificial sweeteners. It's the sodium combined with the stevia in there that gives you that kind of palatability. My wife drinks a lot more water when there's LMNT. My kids drink more water if I add a little sprinkle of it to their water. So it's like as a coach, you might notice my clients drink more water.
They're more hydrated.
Because they're using LMNT.
I also feel like I get like a little bit of energy from it. I think the reason why I feel like I get energy is sometimes when I'm really low calorie, I'm also low sodium and not hydrated. Yep. And just sipping on that always makes me feel a little bit better. So you add that to it. That's probably why. And it's simple. It's easy. Tastes good.
I've narrowed down, Adam, like the best, we've talked about this before, but now I have it down to like a number. The best pumps I'll get in the gym, because I work out in the morning and I don't eat till after. I eat when I get here. I'll do a packet of LMNT in this big container right here, which is I think 42 ounces.
Yeah.
So I get up in the morning, I do my thing upstairs, and then I come down. My workout's typically around 7:15, 7:20 in the morning. 6 a.m. I drink a whole one of these with 1 packet of LMNT. If I do that, the pumps are like ridiculous. Like
I think it's so funny because you think about all these crazy. There's so many products on to increase the pump.
Nothing
like
comes
just
close.
nothing like some salt and water. You know what I'm saying?
Nothing does it better than that. I know, if I had carbs
Simple.
with it, it'd be even better. But I don't eat anything.
Yeah, I had mine all the way down to the carb. Like I knew
just
exactly
don't eat,
how much water, sodium, and then carbohydrates to get to just the crazy pump.
Dude, so remember I brought this up on a recent podcast, and I was talking about the chemicals that people spray on the benches and machines.
Yeah.
So this was a thing that started really happening during and after COVID. So when I used to work out in gyms, the policy was, especially when I managed gyms, was bring a towel, wipe your sweat off. That was it. It's like bring a towel, wipe your sweat off. And then some gyms, not a lot of gyms, but some gyms would have like paper towels in a spray bottle, but nobody was doing it. Nobody was doing it. And then COVID came, everybody got freaked out, and it became like this,
blasting it everywhere.
yeah, like the culture now is after you work out, go get the spray bottle, spray the bench,
Sanitize the whole thing.
and sanitize the hell out of it. And I hate that. I hate following somebody who does that. When I see people doing that on the bench, I go, no, leave it. Because then I get on the bench and I smell the chemicals, and I know that the xenoestrogens, the hormone disrupting chemicals, I feel like are not a good trade-off. Yeah. I would rather be on a bench that has
It's
a
not
little
even
bit of sweat.
close, is it?
No.
It's not even close.
We're so afraid of germs now. And I know being clean that's great. We that was a wonderful breakthrough in society, was understanding germs. But we went so far with that we antibiotic the hell out of everything. Yeah. We have chemicals that cause we know are connected to cancers and hormone disruption. Where just wiping the sweat off the bench is perfectly fine, or maybe a little soap and water. But they're spraying like Lysol on there.
Yeah.
Which is
they're just killing it off.
No, it's all
that lack of
antibacterial
exposure has its own problems.
Oh, yeah.
Like we need to build up a defense system against these and be immersed in it on some level.
Oh, a common antibacterial that was in soap. I don't even know if they use it anymore. Doug, maybe you could look up triclosan health effects. So when you would get like antibacterial soap or spray, they would add something called triclosan. I think I'm saying it right. And what this does is when you spray a surface with it, it leaves a residue that has antibiotic properties. So it's an antibiotic. We know, and I don't know if they still use this, but this was everywhere. Okay, here we go. Ready? It's still in a lot of products. It's an endocrine disruptor, meaning it can disrupt hormone metabolism and interfere with your hormonal system. It may impair reproductive function.
Indeed.
It can cause or increase the risk of allergies, skin irritation, cancer. Some studies suggest that long-term exposure to triclosan may increase the risk of certain cancers. It could cause antibiotic resistance. In other words, we're creating bacteria that are like super bacteria.
And a thyroid issue.
And thyroid issues. By the way, soap kills bacteria perfectly fine. It doesn't cause any of that stuff. But it's in so many things, including toothpaste, mouthwash, hand soap, shampoo, lotions, deodorants. Like that's just an example. Yeah. So in other words, to just basic soap was perfectly antibacterial.
The extent of which we.
I think that post is flying because I think it's. I haven't heard anybody actually talk about that, but it's kind of obvious,
dude.
I think most people understand now how antibiotics and antibacterial stuff isn't ideal for our microbiome, and then yet. That's what we're blasting these things over versus getting a little bit of sweat on there. It's like that's probably not a great trade-off. Yeah,
everybody's so gets in your skin and
they're so afraid of like getting on a bench or because someone. Now wipe your sweat. That's fine. You don't want.
Now I wonder how many. Because I think
gyms need to get rid of it. I want to make an announcement. If you're a gym,
all they have to do, Sal, is actually just put something more, proper in the water bottle. Just water. Yeah, spray and wipe with water.
That's it.
Would be fine.
Water and soap.
Just a little bit of soap.
Just basic soap. Yeah. But I even think that's not necessary. You just wipe your sweat, and then at the end, twice a day, you have your porters go through and clean everything. Yeah. And you're perfectly fine. These chemicals are spraying everywhere. It's not a good trade-off. And you're working out, you're breathing hard.
I was say not to mention you're breathing. If everyone's constantly spraying those things in there, you're breathing it in.
It's freaking chemical warfare in the gyms with the amount of shit that if I see a bench that someone just used and I see it's wet with like the chemicals. I'd rather go on one that has a little sweat spot on it.
Yeah.
And I'll just wipe the sweat with a towel.
That's so true.
And I'm perfectly fine. I think if you're at a gym, get rid of that stuff right away. It's worse. It's worse for people.
None of that penetrates me with my mask on, though. So I'm safe.
Do you work out with a mask, dude?
Yeah, dude.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Are you struggling to get a flat midsection, a flat tummy? We have a free flat tummy guide. In there, we give you strategies, techniques, exercises, nutrition tips on how to get a flat tummy. You can get it right now. It's totally free by clicking on the link in the description below. Hey, speaking of all
I
this,
want to keep it alive.
have you guys seen? So this is a low bar, okay? Here I'll ask you guys this question. Have you guys ever felt positive or encouraged by government policy when it comes to health?
I know.
In any way?
Ever.
I feel like I feel like it's too good to be true. Like seeing RFK get sworn in, and then the things that he wants to do just seem like, is this possible? But then again, I've said this forever on this show that I tend to be the least alarmist out of all of us, and I really believe that the pendulum swings, and we've swung so hard in that direction that maybe we're actually swinging back the other direction.
He has a lot of experience going after big companies and challenging them and winning lawsuits. So, I mean, I'm slightly encouraged.
Same, because the bar is low. Government policy on like chronic health and obesity is terrible. It's so bad that it's made us worse.
Almost doing anything is going to be positive.
It's actually worse.
Caring in general. Like, I didn't even hear that from the other side at all.
And the stuff that they pushed forever, for decades, was actually the opposite. So it's so bad it was actually making people worse. This is the first time I feel optimistic. And it's not because he has experience fighting companies or because I trust the guy. It's because the stuff he says is actually more aligned with real health. Like, he did a post on X where he posted a picture of the breakfast cereals for kids.
Yeah.
And he's like, we need to, like, this is terrible. People feeding their kids this. We got to get in and make sure kids are not eating this crap. He's a government official talking about big company like stuff, talking about sugar and artificial dyes and stuff like that. I think it's amazing. But dude, you got to see the stats that he was quoting. I saved it on like the state of our health. This is going to crap everybody out, but it's pretty bad. So the U.S., 6 in 10 Americans have at least one chronic disease. 4 in 10 Americans have 2 or more chronic diseases, which is ridiculous. Autoimmune diseases are some of the highest in the world. Inflammatory bowel disease, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis. We're the highest, I believe, of all the Western nation. For children in 2022, 30 million children, 40% of our children had at least one health condition, such as allergies, asthma, or autoimmune.
That's crazy.
Autism is 1 in 36 children in the U.S., okay, which is crazy. In the 1980s, it was, you want to know what the number was in the 1980s?
For autism?
Mm-hmm. So right now it's 1 out of 36 kids.
Yeah.
You want to guess?
1 in 1,000.
It was 1 or maybe 4 out of 10,000.
10,000. Wow, even crazier.
I had a doctor that I trained.
What is that increase? That's like
a huge increase.
Thousands of % increase. It's insane.
I had a doctor that I trained who said autism was so rare when he was doing his what do they call it when they
residency?
Mm-hmm. He said it was so rare that there was a person with autism, and that they went to go look at this guy because you couldn't find it anywhere. It was so rare. 18% of late adolescents and young adults have fatty liver disease. 30% of adolescents are pre-diabetic, and more than 40% are overweight or obese. And then he talks about ADD, talks about like all of this stuff. So they're going to talk about exercise, nutrition. They're going to examine SSRIs. They're going to examine ADH medications for kids. Yes. They're like going down the list of stuff. And it's that's the
biggest alarming factors is looking at the health of our kids. Yeah. I understand, adults, that's a major problem, but like if we're not addressing this at the root of it all, if we're not giving them a chance from the very jump, like we got to really take hold of this.
Well, what's scary to me is, and I don't think that I'm not a person that's going to say that the pharmaceutical industry is evil. I don't say that. I just think that I think there's good and bad people in every industry. I think the pharmaceutical industry has some distorted incentives because of the nature of the beast. In other words, the incentive that a pharmaceutical company has to create a lifelong customer from child to adult it's very high. There is no incentive really to cure them and then that's it.
No.
Right? Or to prevent ever needing treatment at all.
Well, it affects, their bottom line.
It's a distorted incentive. So pharmaceutical industry, just because of the nature of it, that's not where we should look to solve these things. They're not going to give it. They're going to give us help when the shit hits the fan, but they're not going to prevent the shit from hitting the fan. Is my whole point.
When you say things like that, does it make you question like the whole idea of capitalism with the pharmaceutical industry? Like almost like you're pro free market for most everything, but then when it comes to something like that,
no,
that's like saying
it's the protection, it's the ability to not question and peer into the data and law, have lawsuits.
Well, the problem
would that be enough? Would that be enough?
Yeah, and the problem is not
something.
You got to be fair with the comparison, because what you're saying is it better? Would you rather get stabbed with a needle a bunch of times or get shot in the face with a shotgun? Well, I'll pick the needle, but that sucks. Still sucks. So capitalism is the best option we have, and I think we could do it better.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's the other option? Make it complete.
Yeah, that's the ugly side, right? Is that driven towards that continual growth, and how do we do this?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean, because they're motivated to get customers. They're motivated, and which is capitalism is built on that. And for most other industries, that serves us as a species. That they're out competing each other to give a something that is better for the customer. But when it comes to the pharmaceutical, it's in their best interest to keep you on medications or get you on another medication. And so if that's the desired outcome from a pharmaceutical company, and that's what's driving it, that capitalistic type of mentality, that can be really dangerous, right?
Yeah, what you're saying is that the special interests or selfish interests play a role in that, but they play a role in that in socialism too. They play a role. So I think the checks and balances need to be a little bit better. I think, like what Justin says, with like lawsuits, with transparency, and I do think that because we have an open society, I think now people are becoming more privy to it. I think COVID sped that the hell up.
Yeah,
I think that really sped that up. A lot of people now are looking, twice at certain things. So
it'd be interesting to see if he, addresses the marketing of these pharmaceutical companies, on TV and media and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, that one's interesting to me.
It's interesting.
When I learned that statistic, I thought that's true. Why are they advertising prescription drug companies that we can't even go buy? We have to have our doctor prescribe us. Why is that advertised on TV? It's like, so they could pay.
It's the messaging.
Yeah, they could pay these media companies and have a little bit of power over them.
Yeah,
which is
crazy.
interesting. Earlier we were talking about studies. I'll give you guys a study that, let me see if I have it here, that, now that we've kind of talked about how to read studies, let's see if you guys can kind of get to, what's interesting with this. So this study showed that men who have sex once a month are 45% more likely to have cardiovascular disease compared to those who have sex 2 to 3 times a week. So there's 2 ways we can look at this, right? So way one,
there's a couple of things. There's the guy who's
stressed.
The guy who's having the low amount of sex like that's probably depressed.
Yeah.
Right. He's probably sitting on and it's probably
his lifestyle's affected for sure.
Well, it's a cycle, right? So not only is he not having a lot of sex, but then he's sitting at home eating Cheetos. He's not exercising, which is not helping his case to have sex.
And he's probably more likely to have erectile dysfunction.
He's more likely not to have that. So it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah. So there's a correlation that can, one person, someone might look at that and be like, oh, if I want to reduce my risk of cardio disease, I need to just have a lot of sex.
Yeah.
But it's probably reverse causation.
Totally.
Yeah. Like the guy who's having almost no sex. Why aren't you having that much sex?
Yes.
You're lonely. You're depressed.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah, I had my cousins were sharing that. Like, you just gotta have more sex.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
So the guy who wants to reduce his risk,
what kind of sex?
He should just go go to a brothel.
Yeah.
I'm lowering my risk.
Can I get an insurance reduction for this?
Can I get a write-off on all this?
write off.
I know.
Speaking of studies, I saw God Sod talking about a study on behavioral stuff. That's what his background is, right? And do you guys know what the number one predictor of child abuse is? The number one predictor.
Step-parent.
Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that. You would think alcoholism. You would think like prior, the parent getting abused prior, like there's a whole host of things that would, but it's like, it's not even close. Like, so like,
it's huge.
yeah, like you're having a step parent is more dangerous for the child than them being an alcoholic or all these other things. Not that that's a good thing, but it's that's how much of it's a greater predictor is just simply a step parent. I thought that was really fascinating. Sad.
And there's a lot of arguments like to try to support like why is that the case? It's competition. It's the responsibility without the connection. I have all this responsibility for this kid, either with resources or through my work, but they're not my kid. Resentment. There's a lot of things that can.
There's also something to be said about why
why those Disney movies.
Why you don't with a child that you just absolutely, because it's yours and you feel this different connection and bond. I feel like when it's your child that is shares a part of you. I feel like there's a different level.
When a kid has a really good step parent, that's like such a nice thing. It's a really great blessing. Like you'll hear sometimes I know a couple of people like this where they're, they oh, that's my dad, that's my mom. It's like, well, actually, he's been raising me since I was 4. Such a great, like a great dad, a great mom.
I mean, that's if you ever hear Katrina talk about, she talks about her stepfather more than she does her own father. Yeah. So her own father she has a similar relationship with her own father as I have my mother, and she's way more was. Troy passed away, but she attributes a lot of her good from what she's learned from him, and so he was a good stepfather.
Yeah, there's a lot. Some of that data is kind of hard to read too, because you'll read that let's say you're in a marriage and you're unhappy, and your spouse is not that great. They're not that great. They're not terrible. They're not like beating everybody and abusing drugs, but they're just not good. And you're really unhappy, and you'll hear, well, your kids will be better off if you get divorced and get happy. The data actually doesn't show that.
It doesn't support
the data
that.
actually shows they're worse.
Yeah.
They're worse off if they're raised by a single
such
parent.
A conundrum.
Yes. And now people hate hearing that because it's against kind of what we want to hear, but the data does show that. Or like I divorced his dad and he's such a crappy guy, I want him completely out of their lives, versus he's in their lives but he's not that great, right? It's actually better that he's in their lives a little bit. And that also a lot of people don't hear that.
I saw a marriage expert talking about this, and it supports the argument that I think I've made before about like why many people end up in divorce. Like one of the number one reasons is just it's purely picking the wrong person, to what I've talked about before of like you're attracted to all of your insecurities and brokenness is what you mistake as love, is you're drawn to this.
I would argue differently now. I would argue that if you look at the way marriage as we understand it, one man, one woman, where did that come from? Like where did that originate from? How we understand it. And it came from the Judeo-Christian religion. And they actually have a framework in there of how successful marriage is supposed to work.
Yeah.
And if you look at the data on people that follow the framework like that, they have very successful marriages. But when you read the framework of how it says you're supposed to be within your marriage, it's the opposite of what you're here. So like I give you an example, what you hear all the time from marriage therapists and counselors, whatever, is you got to get your needs met. You need to get your needs, know what your needs are, express them, and your partner needs to meet your needs. It doesn't say that. It says the key to successful marriage is you meet their needs, is you got to be other focused.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff in there that you read that you go, oh my God. But then you compare it to the data and it's like, it actually works.
I mean, so basically what you're saying is your argument is that it's people not following the original framework to how marriage should be.
Yeah.
Problem with that is
their understanding.
Problem with that is though that there's obviously a major correlation with, just like we just talked about other studies and diets and stuff like that. If you're somebody who puts God above yourself,
totally. I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah, right. That in itself is already, and both of you think that way and you marry, then there's a super high chance that you would be.
That one study I brought up a while ago, couples that pray together, it's a very famous study. Couples that pray together every day, every night, so they pray together openly, their odds of divorce are 1%. That's crazy. That's like you don't find that anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's also an obvious, like, huge correlation. If you have the ability to, there's an old, don't go to bed, angry,
yeah,
right?
And if you believe in God, you believe in God.
If you got to sit down, the girl the spouse you just got in a fight with, you're gonna, that tonight you're gonna sit down and pray. You're gonna have to pray tonight together with them. Yeah. It's like
and you're talking to God. He knows everything.
Yeah. You've got to solve that, right? So there's definitely there's something there just for that, right? Because if the couple has the ability to do that, that means they have the ability to work through.
But even from
problems.
A secular perspective, my grandparents' generation, the understanding around marriage was different than what it became. It became about falling in love, irresistible, meet my needs. With Jerry Maguire, you complete me, right? Everybody's, that's so romantic, whatever. Back in my grandparents' generation, nobody believed that. It was all about, like, we're signing up for this forever. And we're going to raise a family together. Yeah. And you're going to do that job. I'll do this job. And we just go. We just do this together. This is forever. It was never about, like, you complete me.
I forget what I read too. What a huge part social media has played in divorce too. I forgot there's a high percentage.
You know what's playing the biggest role right now? Pornography. Do you know pornography is listed as one of the #1 reasons for divorce today?
Is it?
Yes, it is.
#1
is one of the #1. I don't know if it's #1. Doug, you could put, how often is pornography cited in divorce today? It's one of the top, and the data shows.
So I would say, if you word that like that, it would also, social media would pop up there too. There's probably. like cheating on there. Like there's always, it's listed. Yeah. It's listed in there. It'd be interesting to see what the order it is.
But there was a data on this too. It's like when a couple view pornography regularly together, their odds of divorce go up quite a bit. When the wife looks at it regularly, it goes up quite a bit. If the husband looks at it quite a bit, on his own, it goes up quite a bit. So pornography is playing a huge role today.
Yeah, it says divorce rates double when people start watching porn.
See? Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, what's crazy?
Who would have thought lusting after other people would cause
what's really crazy and unfortunate about that is there's a lot of, there's somebody listening right now, I guarantee you get all fired.
Oh, it's good for
That's a sex expert that tries to make the case all the time for that. We've communicated with them before, and that's their
sex experts are such a. Here we go. Right, I'm gonna pick it up.
Here we
go. It's such a bullshit. It's such a fine. You disagree with me? That's fine. You just keep listening if you disagree. But it's such a bullshit job, and I'll tell you why. Sex experts are experts in pleasure.
Yeah.
But the data will show the best satisfaction with sex comes from connection. Yeah. Sex is a result of deep connection.
Intimacy is like
it's not just a physical act. And so sex experts tell you, how do you satisfy your partner? Touch her here, touch him there, do this weird thing with your tongue or whatever.
Try this buzzy toy.
The best sex, the data shows us, the best sex experienced by people is people who've been married for like 30 years. They're past their prime. They've only been with each other. They're not doing weird shit with each other. It's the connection and the intimacy.
I would have, straight up, I would have never believed that.
Same.
14 years ago, I would have said, no, that's no way, not true.
It's all about novelty,
the novelty, the new, no matter who I was with within 6 months, I don't care how beautiful, how amazing, how whatever she is, then something new or different is always with. But when you truly find someone that you're in love with or willing to love like that, it grows. Yeah. Which is a trip. It's a trip to think. Katrina and I always talk about this with each other, how amazed that we are that it's 14 years later and the sex life, the attraction, everything is better now. Because you always hear the honeymoon phase too. Like people always say, like, oh yeah, well, once you get wait till you get through the honeymoon phase.
And are you guys? I'm putting you on the spot, but are you? Okay, I'll put you on the spot. Are you objectively the hottest you've ever been?
No, I don't think so. She might say that though.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I would say the same thing. Exactly. I look at when she was 29, 30 when we first got together, and I'm way more attracted to her in her mid 40s than I am what she was in her 20s.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. There's something to be said about that, but I would have never believed it. Like, so if I was listening to this and I'm 20 and I'm 20 something, and I'm just like, yeah, you guys know what you're talking about. No. I'd be saying things like, oh, this because you don't have any good sex. That's what I'd say. you obviously don't have good sex. Yeah. If you see what's going on over at my place right now, it'd be a different story.
Sign up for the stripper classes. Look what I learned, honey.
Yeah. But I think you see too, satisfaction go up when people pursue that kind of stuff, but it's because the intimacy level goes up. It's not because they learned a new trick.
Well, it's also probably a spike and then drop too, right? There's probably like the novelty.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
No, but what I mean is, if let's say you have a couple long time and they feel like our sex life is a little whatever, so they take it. So then they read a book together, or the intimacy level goes up because they're vulnerable with each other. Again.
Yeah.
They're trying. So that's why you'll see. Something.
Oh, honestly, I think that because they try and these sex experts try and pull and use the studies to support what pornography can do to support their argument. But I would argue that that's just the vulnerability piece of like two of you agreeing you're going to do something and be vulnerable.
Some of the best reported
It's taking the focus off of each other. You know, we're projecting outward instead of like, you know,
with
keeping
each other
it within.
No, some of the best reported, if the data shows this, some of the best reported satisfaction with sex lives are couples who are been married for a long time, they're past their prime, who were their first and only partners. That's some of the best satisfaction ratings you get.
Oh, I haven't.
He's
heard
the
that.
only man I've ever been with. She's the only woman I've ever been with, and they grew together through that process. That is so counter from what the world tells you. The world is like, you got to try them out first. See if
You've been eating at Sizzler your whole life.
Yeah.
And you have no idea.
Yeah,
you have no idea what you have no idea what Ruth Chris tastes
You know
like.
what's so-
what I'm saying? It's
you know
like
what's crazy
best
about
steak
that?
I ever had in my life. Right now.
Hey, you know what's crazy about that?
With Arby's.
Yeah.
By the way, that's actually not true. However, even if it was true, you're happier.
I mean, that's
so crazy to me.
that's-
Well, you've never tried, you know, you're satisfied with your Honda, but you've never driven a Ferrari. That's why.
Yeah.
Even if that was true, which is not true, the data actually shows it has nothing to do with that, because I can get into the
They
data.
got
if
a
you
lot
want.
of accessories you can buy.
Yeah, but they're happier. So who gives a shit? You know what I mean?
I mean, it's true. At the end of the day,
I know.
if you're happier, you're happier. You know? It doesn't matter for what reasons. You know,
Dude, speaking of happy, and it's this funny story. So I this morning I go out there and I'm talking to Cole, and so remember on the Christmas what was it, the white elephant gift? Remember he stole
when you
your,
stole
your
mine.
Caldera lab?
Yeah.
And he's like the youngest guy in here. How old is Cole? Is he 20? Is he even 21 yet? Is he 21?
Is he? He's not.
No, I don't think so.
because
He's
I remember
20.
we went somewhere and he wasn't able to
Yeah.
drink.
At the Christmas party.
Yeah.
he was-
Young kid. He's like, what are you going to do with Caldera lab? He loves it.
Yeah.
That's why he stole
Yeah,
it.
seriously, he's already got the youthful skin on his
Yeah,
side.
dude,
Like, come on,
you
guys.
go backwards
That's
too
great.
far, bro.
Yeah.
Relax.
Yeah, right?
You already look too young, dude.
You look like a baby.
You already look too young, man.
Dude, the combination of the base layer with the oil, that is like, what is that?
I actually had a DM the other
I wasn't
day.
using the base layer before.
So I had a good time to bring this up on the commercial is that I had a DM the other day about it was a female who said that her husband and her son both love and use it, and that is it good for women too? It was 100%. It's all natural, so both men and women.
My wife
can
will
use it.
steal mine if I don't bring her one.
Yeah, Katrina loves it and uses it too. So if you're a listener and you've been curious about it as a female, like it's not just for men. I mean, I think they marketed in that direction because there was a need in the market and they filled that need. But yeah, no.
I'd like to see their data. I would be surprised if more men used it now. I bet you.
Oh, you think there's that many women that are using it?
think so.
Oh, I don't think so. I think
I'd like to see.
I think they market strong to men, and that's got to be their done. What would you say, Doug?
Men.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We should
yeah.
ask them.
I mean,
Because I know what happened in my house. My wife tried it, and
I'll
now she
ask,
steals it.
but I mean, I think that's where it's just smart. It's the women's skincare is so competitive.
Yeah.
That I think they very similar to Viori's success, right? I saw they instead of going after Lululemon directly in athleisure wear for women,
went through the back
they
door.
went to the back door. They went through men. Now there's a lot of women that are all wearing that also, but and I'm sure the same thing as Caldera. Caldera is focused on men, and I think as a side effect, some women are trying it or using it, but I would think that's still their dominant market. So.
Probiotics have been shown to improve health, digestion, recovery from workouts, even reduce anxiety in some people and depression in some people. I don't think I need to convince you that probiotics are healthy, but which one do you get? Seed. Seed is the world's best probiotic, hands down. Check them out. Go to seed.com/mindpump. Use the code 25mindpump, get 25% off. All right, back to the show.
First question is from Sky Real Lejo. Messed that up. Do trigger sessions still send the signal to build muscle and speed up the metabolism?
All right, so we got to define trigger session first. Some people refer to trigger sessions like a feeder session,
Grease in the groove.
or grease in the groove, or microdosing. So trigger session is just a term that we came up with our program Maps Anabolic. Essentially what it is they're little mini workouts in between your main workouts. and they're not really workouts. You're using bands typically with a trigger session or body weight, and you're just kind of getting a little bit of a pump in the muscle. You're just working it a little bit. You're not anywhere near
We're
intense.
trying to break down.
Yeah. So it's like, I hit, my full body on Monday. Today I'm going to do a trigger session for chest. And let's say I could do 70 push-ups straight. I'm going to do like 3 sets of like 15 just to get a little pump in my chest. And really what trigger sessions do is they facilitate recovery, and they actually make the adaptation signal louder. They take your previous workout, the main workout, and they just add a little turbo to it,
which is a direct connection to building muscle and speeding your metabolism
Definitely.
up. Yeah, if you have the ability to recover at a faster rate, you're going to build more muscle. If you build more muscle, it's going to speed your metabolism up. I think the way not to look at it is like, is this extra workout enough to be burning X amount of calories to burn body?
No.
It's not. Don't think of it that way. It's that you're optimizing your training program and your sessions, and you're helping facilitate recovery, speeding that process up. You can speed that process up. You in turn build more muscle, speed your metabolism.
Now, what I would also like to add, now that we know what we know with CGMs, right, continual glucose monitors, what we know about
with insulin
activity, insulin sensitivity, which staying sensitive to insulin is a great strategy for health and for fat loss. I bet you trigger sessions have a really nice impact on blood sugar because throughout the day you're doing a little bit of movement. And I bet you it's better than walking because it's a little bit more targeted and more intense than a walk. So I do think that, because here's what I notice with trigger sessions. When I do trigger sessions, I definitely get a little boost in my regular workouts. I notice I get a little bit more juice out of them. But what I notice the most is fat loss. I've always noticed fat loss from trigger sessions. So I'm wondering if that's the reason. Because it's not like I'm burning tons of calories. A total trigger session will take me 7 minutes.
Yeah, but there's another correlation or behavior I noticed that's attached to that for me is when I do the trigger sessions, I'm just more active through the day too.
Because of the energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I remember when the most disciplined I ever was around competing time, and I remember I used to hang the bands in my living room over this door. They were all set up to go. And if I just I just made it a habit that, hey, every hour or two, go over there and do a couple exercises. And there'd be times where I'm like sitting down on the couch, not wanting to do anything, get up and do that. After I do it, now all of a sudden, now I'm doing the dishes, I'm doing other things. And so it would just promote more activity and moving. So I think there's something to be said there too with like its connection to fat loss.
Yeah. Next question is from Risa Auger. When should you consider eating back your burned calories?
Oh, so this is like when you're calculating how many calories you're burning through activity. Should you make up for them with extra calories?
I'm assuming when you're trying to gain, right?
Yeah.
That's obviously the strategy here.
By the way, you got to be careful with this too, because
this is a tricky kind of mentality.
Yeah, because like what you'll calculate or what the apps will show that you're burning with activity isn't very accurate.
Yeah.
So you usually equate. You got to be kind of careful with this. And I don't necessarily like looking at like activity as like this phenomenal way for creating calorie deficit. The deficit should mainly come from resting metabolic rate, and also the big thing is your diet. So again, this is when someone's trying to gain. This is when I'm like, okay, you're doing it more activity. Why don't we bump your calories a little bit? It's typically what I do.
Yeah, this is difficult because I need to know the person that I'm talking to. Because if it was somebody who's like a hard gainer, that they already struggle with hitting their maintenance calories or in a surplus, then I'm encouraging them to probably increase calories and pay attention to that every which way they can. But the average person who's just kind of maybe going through a mini bulk, or like, I've decided to go in a slight surplus right here, and you're trying to figure this out. If whatever you've decided is your surplus, let's say there's a day where you burned more calories because you were just more active, that's okay. It's not like it changes. What ends up happening, and this is, I explained this in my little docu-series I did, where in a month's time, especially that first month, I built 4 or 5 pounds of muscle, and I lost almost 20 pounds of fat. Well, how is that possible? Because we know you can't burn body fat and build muscle at the same exact time. Well, that's because it wasn't happening exact same time. In that month, there was periods where I was a little bit in a surplus, and there were periods when I was a little bit in a deficit. And so there was times when my body was anabolic and times when my body's catabolic. So if there's times with this person who's trying to build muscle, so long as they're in a surplus most of the time or a lot of the time, they're going to gain. And the few times that they're a little bit in a deficit, they'll probably lose a little bit of body fat, especially if it's not a crazy amount amount of a deficit for an extended period of time. And so it's not something that I've ever worried about myself or with a client like, oh, you burn an extra 200 calories a day. Make sure you bump your calories 200 more even day. It's like, we've decided your caloric maintenance is here. We've decided this is your goal calories. I'm not worried if that day you had
it does seem like splitting hairs, right? Like,
totally.
I burn extra. I got to eat it. Now I got to eat an extra 367 calories. Or
and now you're trying to use your tool to measure every different kind of workout, and you're like, oh, that workout burned that many, so now I got to eat this more. It's like, dude, it does not have to be that complicated.
Also, we have a special in February. MAPS, Anabolic, and the No BS 6-pack formula together. These programs were actually created to be run together. Great for building muscle, boosting metabolism, burning body fat. Get them both of them, for $59.99. You can check them out at mapsfebruary.com. All right, back to the show.
Next question is from Mike OK72. Do you recommend any kind of break from training?
Depends who you are. If you're a fitness fanatic, yes. If you're like consistent, don't miss workouts, you push it, you love spending time in the gym, a break will give you better results. Period. End of story. And a break can look like time off, or if you're like me and time off is like, you might as well tell me to cut my leg off, then the break would look like 4 weeks or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of dramatically reduced intensity or volume. So your break looks like a much easier workout. But the data shows this with fitness fanatics, so that category of people, breaks produce better results because they tend to push it too far for too long, and the breaks are needed for those individuals.
Yeah, and for those people, I like shifting the focus and working on other things that aren't as taxing on the body, and like working on bouts of mobility, and where I can find opportunities to kind of reinforce stability and control, and all the other aspects of the pursuit towards fitness and health. There's just so many things to cover, and I know that I'm not always balanced, right? And so I'm just kind of continuously looking at this moving target of what, where there's deficits. And a lot of times it's taking a break from the intensity of the training and the weight training and focusing a little bit more on, the movement aspect, or focusing more on the diet aspect, or just, my overall mental health and relationships and that kind of thing. So
I'm going to give some generic but very specific advice to the audience that I've never have in regards to this, that I think aligns with this. We've said before on the podcast that we think that almost everybody, if not everybody, should at least one period of time in the year run like a performance or a symmetry type of program, right? To address all that. I'm going to make the argument that I think that everybody should at least for one period of the year run like a MAPS 15 type of a protocol. Totally. And what is leading me to say that is, it just keeps getting confirmed with me with our listeners and audience and people I know that have gone through this. A lot of people that listen to this podcast, I would say a greater percentage are fitness fanatic or fitness people that are really into it than it is. They don't miss days. Yeah, they don't miss days. They're very consistent, or they come from a history of training hard and pushing. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten DMs and I'm seeing people report back to me like, man, I really didn't believe I'd see results on MAPS 15, and I saw this and I saw that. I think the people that are hardcore fitness people tend to have a tendency to over-apply the intensity and volume. And I think a period of running like a MAPS 15 protocol, I think it'll help you peer into that if you're that type of person. So I think that everybody should run something like that once a year.
MAPS Anabolic Advanced has back off weeks in there. After each phase, there's a week where you're really backing off on things, and I think it's one of the reasons why that program, people will write back and say, I got some of the best gains I've ever had in my entire life, and it's because it's one of the only programs we actually scheduled it in there and said, after each phase you have to take a week off.
Next question is from Richie IE89. I have 3 consecutive days off a week. I want to try a full body workout. But is training full body 3 days in a row a smart idea? I currently do legs and biceps on Monday, chest and triceps on Tuesday, and back and biceps on Wednesday.
It depends on how you do it. You could do full body 3 days a week.
Just if it's modify intensity?
Yeah, one day is heavy compound lifts, the next day is isolation, then the last day is mobility full body. Then you're perfectly fine.
There's a way to do that.
Yeah, this split works perfectly fine as well. It's not ideal to work out for 3 days and then take 4 days off.
Yeah.
But it's fine. You would still progress as so long as you're smart with your programming. You could do it. But if I had to do full body 3 days, that's how I would do it. I go like heavy Monday, compound lifts. Tuesday, isolation exercises for the full body. And then, Wednesday would be mobility, full body. And then, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off.
Yeah, I don't know how I would. I go back and forth on. I mean, you could even do like the upper body, lower body type of toggling back
upper,
and forth.
lower, full,
yeah, something like that. You could. There's a lot of different things. I'd also always want a client like this to consider like a MAPS 15 type routine. Like I'm assuming your other days when you work are long days, and so getting to the gym for an hour is just not feasible. But maybe getting a 15, 20-minute workout in your garage or something is feasible. And so this kind of micro dosing approach versus trying to cram it all in your 3 days.
By the way, something else that nobody ever really considers, bodybuilders do this often, but really nobody else does. Because our weeks are 7 days, we tend to, just out of convenience, program everything in 7-day blocks.
Yeah, if we're start looking at it in the month or something.
Bodybuilders for a long time would do like a routine. They'd be like 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, type routines. Like every week, each day looks different, right? But they're not looking at from a 7-day period. They're looking at from a 30-day period or a 35-day period or something like that.
So that's how I think. That's what I meant by I would actually go upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower at the end of the month. Yeah, irregardless. So at the end of the month, so some weeks you have 2 of them going to be upper, and then other times you're going to have 2 or lower, and you just toggle through the whole month like that. After 30 days, though, it looks like. Yeah, so
after the whole year, it looks pretty.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's sometimes we look at everything in this like snapshot of 7 days, and it's like, no, you're.
I actually like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, because you could easily go upper, lower, upper, and then lower, upper.
Yeah, all the way through, and then at the end of the month, if you do the math on, you're basically getting 2 really good workouts of upper or lower in a week. Like that's pretty solid. You can make some pretty good gains that way.
That works well. All right, I know you liked that episode. If you did, check this one out. 30% body fat. For men, this is way too high. This is actually a bit high for women as well. So in today's episode, we're talking about how you can go from 30 to 10. What is 10% body fat? This is when you have a visible six-pack. Can you go from 30 to 10%? Yes, it's possible, but not if you guess along the way. So we're going to talk about how you can do that in today's episode.
Now, there's a huge range, right, of like body types.
Yes.
Some people can run a little bit heavier or a little bit higher body.